Hey guys, my name is Kevin and welcome to the Immersive Experience podcast. We're gathering experts in the fields of audio engineering and immersive audio technology to learn and explore more. Now the hope is that we can encourage audio engineers as you navigate and explore this whole thing of immersive technology. And each season is going to have a different focus and area of conversation. For season 1, we're focused on churches and the faith community as they navigate what it means to create engaging immersive audio environments. And here's the thing, we're bringing in a different host for each season of the Immersive Experience podcast. For season 1, to talk to the church audio community, we brought in Luke Vogel, who spent the last 17 years over at Church of the Highlands. He helped them go from a church plant to the multi-site church that they are today. And Luke and the guys are going to talk about what it means to mix in an immersive environment. They're going to share stories from their time at front of house, as well as some of the things that they learned along the way. One of the things that Alan mentions in this episode is ChoirFlex and how much of a game changer it is.
The biggest thing with the choir is we use ChoirFlex, and that just, it is a total game changer.
Well, our sponsor for today's episode is MikeReynolds.com, and you can actually rent a ChoirFlex from them. If you're mixing a choir, then ChoirFlex is a must. You got to try this thing. With MikeReynolds.com, you can rent a ChoirFlex, they'll send it over, they'll help you set it up. It's so easy to use, and it's gonna get your choir loud. And if you want to keep the ChoirFlex, they're going to apply that rental fee towards the purchase of your ChoirFlex. So head over to MikeReynolds.com, check out all the gear that they have, just choose the date you want to receive the gear, when you want to send it back, and get yourself a ChoirFlex. Okay, on to episode 2. Let's jump in and let's hear from the guys on how they mix in an immersive environment.
Awesome. Well, guys, I loved hearing about each of your rooms. Let's get in and talk a little bit about maybe mixing style and how the definition systems have affected the way that you approach the mix. I know each of us are kind of artists in our own right when it comes to mixing, but tell me about your styles.
So I like to feel like I'm genre agnostic. You have to be, because we've got a traditional and a contemporary. I have to live in both of those worlds. And so I just kind of try to take each song at its face value and try to like mix to that song. And like, is it a ballad? Is it, a rock and roll song? Is it, a big choir feature song? I just am trying to like pick out those key elements and make sure I'm getting that on each of them. Vocals are going to always be the key, the linchpin, because that's the song. Yeah. But it's got to have, the rhythm has got to feel right for the song. The drums, the bass, they've got to work together for whatever genre the song is in. Yeah. And then everything else surrounding that has got to slot in and drive the mix forward.
What about your traditional service? You said you had a huge choir, but you also have 6 singers up front.
Yeah.
Like, what's your blend between that? Like, does your choir still drive it, or are they BGVs at that point?
Is it call and response?
Yeah.
Or is it...
It really depends on the song. Typically, most Sundays we're going to have a choir feature that will have, like, for that one moment, it's either choir only or choir with a soloist.
Yeah.
For the rest of the congregational music, it's the worship leader is on top, and then it's the choir, and we're sneaking in the praise team there behind that.
Cool.
So, and we're really just kind of going for a big vocal sound. And definition plays a massive role in that because we are routing all the vocals into the definition system and it's coming in from everywhere, And ideally the congregation and the choir kind of all mix together. And because we have such a diversity of styles, I try to be genre agnostic in the way I mix. Yeah. And really just approach each song independently and try to make the best mix for that song and be true to like what that genre is really needs. Whether it's a really band driven, it's got a good groove, or it's a ballad, or it's a rock song, or it's a choir, hymn. They all you're expecting different things out of the mix. Whether it's a really tight bass and kick thing, or orchestral percussion stuff. They might have different features. So it's all about the vocal, of course, but depending on the genre, I'm have a secondary focus that changes.
Okay, so you say it's all about the vocal, of course, and we understand that, sure, but like, Talk to me a little bit about how did that change when you got your definition room? Like how did your approach with vocals? I mean, like tell us a little bit about you've got this massive choir, you've got frontline singers. Go into that a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so before our room wasn't super forgiving with the EQ curve of the room. It wasn't very flat, and you had to really make room for vocals in the mix. You're EQing everything to get out of the way of the vocals, and you're also just like having to like maybe not have a guitar as loud as it should be. You're having to sacrifice something in order to get the vocals to like sit right, sure. And sometimes even sacrifice some of the vocal EQ, to get them stick out, right. Or to get it loud enough or whatever. And with definition, there's none of that. We don't struggle at all, and we use very little vocal EQ compared to what we used to use, and everything just sits and feels
so
right.
You're in a large room with a large choir. So I'm assuming you have 5 or 6 mics on your choir?
3.
3, okay. So 3, that's pretty impressive for such a large choir.
Yeah,
no doubt.
And then you've got this orchestra and strings in front of you and percussion. Like, and you're trying to get that choir on top of all that, and it's all bleeding into those mics.
Right.
Like, how is that even possible?
Well, we have a really large stage, so we really have done a good job over the years of trying to isolate everything. So in that service, the drums are in a cage completely, and we've kind of placed everything around. Like the strings are nowhere near the brass because the brass are super loud. The choir is behind everything, so those mics aren't picking up brass or anything because they're totally upstage. And everything's close mic'd. All of our strings are individually clip mic'd. Brass each, I think, we've got every brass is mic'd individually as well.
Wow.
So it gives us a ton of control, and like we're using dynamic mics on brass because we don't want to have a bunch of ambience in there, and so you kind of make microphone decisions and placement decisions to get as much ambience out of each individual microphone.
Impressive. So you have a large choir. You said 50, 60 people, 6 vocalists up front, percussion, orchestra, horns, band. How do you manage all that bleed into those choir mics, and B, get those choir mics over everything with all that bleed?
Yeah, so it's been an evolution for sure, and the first thing is just where things are placed on stage. So the choir is the most upstage thing on stage, and so the mics for them are behind everything else, and everything else is pointed away from them. And then all the instruments are individually mic'd and close mic'd. We use dynamic mics and all the brass to try to reduce ambient bleed. All the orchestra, all the string instruments have their own mic that clips onto their instrument. But the biggest thing with the choir is we use Choir Flex, and that it is a total game changer. Before we had that, we would have to we were having to high pass 250, and then you're boosting 3-4K, you're cutting out 500, and now it's just straight line EQ, flat, 3 microphones, and you just turn up the fader. And honestly,
that's pretty cool.
Honestly, more often than not, we keep having to turn the choir down.
So
wow.
3 microphones for a 60-person choir.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Are they in the front? Or are they hanging over them? How are you doing that?
So they're on stands because we clear our stage between services, and so we've got to get them out. And so they're on stands, and they're pretty much pointed at the second to the top row.
Okay.
And just pretty much flat at that.
How far from?
They're probably, I'd say, maybe 8 feet away from the second top row.
With Choir Flex, you're literally getting 3 mics over a full choir orchestra band.
Yes.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
So it actually makes mixing a choir fun.
Oh yeah. I used to hate with a passion mixing choirs.
Yeah.
And now it's come on, bring it on. I want more.
That's awesome.
So stylistically, you've got the choir. Is that kind of the main thing? How do you How do the frontline singers fall into your mix with that?
For congregational songs, the worship leader is the top thing. They're the person leading. Everyone's going to connect with him. He's on the top. And then it's choir and the background, the praise team kind of sit in behind them, and we kind of blend them together. You're not really going to pick them out. Occasionally, some of them will have a solo, and we'll bump them up for that. But really, we're wanting it to just feel like a big wash of vocals, and we're piping all the vocals into definition, and it just makes this big, vibrant, awesome vocal sound.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool. So you feel like when you're able to do that, it really like increases the congregational response. Like people feel like they can sing along.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's cool.
Honestly, I think it accomplishes the cathedral feel better than not having a definition system. I've got a pretty old building, an old congregation, and you've got a pretty new building. So how do you guys handle this stuff?
So our approach we had to learn on the fly really for the new building, because we're coming from pretty much a gymnasium, concrete. There was panels up, but it wasn't nothing fancy.
Yeah.
So mixing that room mono with 3-point sources was crazy.
Oh, wow.
So when we got to go into the new building, mixing on a line array, with definition and stuff, it was a complete game changer.
Yeah.
So had to really learn how to mix the band differently. Because in the old room, we did have a drum cage. This new room, we didn't have a drum cage. It was just the circle baffles right in front of them. So how we approached it was obviously vocals on top. So let's get great vocals first. And then from there, work on the band. So drums, bass, guitar. And man, ever since we got into definition and stuff, like we talked about, the vocals are just stunning.
Yeah.
And the less amount of EQ that you have to use is awesome. It's great. And even with drums and stuff, you can really dial in your drums just with a few EQ moves versus like scooping everything or boosting here and there.
Right.
So how I approach the rest of the mix with the band especially is I'm a musician, so I want to hear, each part individually. I don't want stuff to overlap. And a lot of times, like some of our guitar players, sometimes their tone will start to overlap, very mid-heavy, right? And so we have to separate that out. How can we EQ that a little differently or compress it differently to separate it?
Sure.
Or how can we use panning in the system to do that? So I approach it very musically. So I want to be the musician behind the console. That way it's bringing out what they're doing on the stage.
Yeah.
That way it's like I'm a part of the band.
When you were in the gymnasium, did you have amps on stage, or were they isolated somewhere else?
They were isolated somewhere else,
Okay.
but they were still bleed through doors.
Still bleeding
and stuff
through doors,
like that.
Yeah.
and now they're completely isolated where you're in the new building?
Well, we're using Kempers,
you're using
profilers.
Kempers,
Oh, yeah,
okay.
sure.
Yeah,
So it's great. There's the only stage volume we have is from drums.
some drums.
So it's
Yeah.
great. And acoustic guitar every now and then.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get that heavy
Because
picker.
that's something that takes the room over, right? Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
So what about vocals? How many vocalists do you have on stage usually?
Typically we have 4. So we have 4 on the front, and then maybe a guitar player or something like that will do some from the back.
Yeah.
But on special occasions we'll have 6. So we'll just line them up on the front. And typically we were doing like 1, 2, maybe 3 people would lead, maybe on a Sunday. But like this past Sunday, all 4 vocalists led a song. So trying to tackle that was pretty fun. But it was great though, because I didn't have to make any EQ changes. Only thing I had to do was make fader movements. It made it super easy.
That's cool.
So, but it's really cool with, especially with definition, is using, like if only 2 people are going to lead, taking the other 2 and putting them some in the definition system. So that way it just brings out it feels like people are singing all around you.
Right.
And we use a lot of backing tracks because our band is experienced, but not like all the way there yet. And we have, sometimes we don't have like a bass player or a rhythm player, right? So we use tracks and supplement a lot of that stuff.
Sure.
And the biggest thing for me is background vocals in my tracks. I love it, but I want the choir-ish kind of sound. I don't want like the isolated vocal of whoever was leading the song.
You're not doing a duet. It's,
Right.
Yeah.
And man, using that in the definition was awesome. I've done that for the past the past couple months has really worked really well with just interacting with the whole room. It changes the way the room feels and
totally.
interacts.
Yeah.
It's nuts, but
That's how I approach it. More musically, like isolate each part, make sure I can hear all the parts together. Try not to let things overlap. I hate it because like you're going to get complaints when someone's like, man, I can't hear what the guitar player's doing. I see him doing things, but I can't hear what he's doing.
Right.
My favorite old adage is the husband comes up, I can't hear my wife.
Right. Yep.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Only the time I've ever had a complaint about not hearing vocals in the room was because the amp had tripped.
Yeah.
And all the front fills and stuff were off.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Cool. Talk about your approach, Mike. Like, just I know you are, I mean, in an entirely different room as far as like size and.
I think, my approach in general is slightly different than a lot of live engineers, mainly because I started out in a recording studio.
Yeah, I'm totally with you.
So I kind of walk into the room with an idea of what I want that electric guitar to sound like, what I want that bass guitar to sound like, where I want it in the mix. And so usually that starts with me having a conversation with the musicians of like, hey, can we work on your tone? Before I ever hit the EQ, the compressor, or even the mic placement. Like, let's walk over to your amp, let's plug your guitar in, let's play some tone. Like, let's mess with your tone knobs on your bass. Like, that's really my approach, is like, let's fix it on the stage first, which I think works out really well with the definition process of fix the room first. So we fix the room, we fix the stage, and then I literally have like a blank canvas to just paint with, which is really cool. From there, kind of what you guys were saying, I want to honor the song. I want the melodies and the counter melodies to really stick out. I want the rhythm to really drive it. And ultimately, for me, I want to emotionally engage my audience, which is really something that's challenging, and you kind of have to read your room and everything else at the same time, and maybe change placement of a fader or an instrument in the mix to kind of create that emotional moment, which is really cool.
So
I think
what kinds of things are you looking for when you're reading the room?
when I'm reading the room, I'm looking for engagement, and engagement can be a lot of things. Unfortunately, in the church, we usually rate engagement by raised hands, but that I don't raise my hands in worship. I'm not comfortable doing that. I look for heads bobbing. I look for people singing. I look for feet tapping. One of the really cool things about Seacoast is we have a lot of people that like to just literally dance. And I can kind of read that room, and I can kind of look over to a section where I know there's usually some people, and if they're not feeling it, I can see that.
Right.
And then I obviously have to decide how to fix that, which is
it too loud or not loud enough?
is it too loud, not loud enough? Are they not hearing the vocal? Are they not feeling the rhythm? I mean, all those things kind of play into part. So it's really cool just kind of reading that. I spend a lot of time looking around the room at the stage, because also, like, is the band feeling it? Because like that's really important to me too. Like, because even if you're on stage, you can still feel the energy of the room, and if they're not feeling it, the room's not going to feel it.
Right.
And so that approach is definitely like a strong point for me. I love to just watch the room engage. And you can kind of watch the room light up on certain songs. And that's really when I start to push those gang vocals behind you and really like kind of encourage the singing and just watch that congregation come to life is really cool.
Totally. So. Yeah, I love the ability that you have with the definition system to like progressively build the song throughout, maybe make it super intimate at the beginning of the song, and then when it hits that bridge that's very anthemic, throw some of those maybe track vocals or BGVs or gang vocals or whatever around the room, and be able to just encourage that congregational engagement.
That's a huge thing. I think, we do a first Wednesday service every month, and it's just a big long worship service. And usually we start with upbeat songs, we work into the more anthemic songs, ballads, and then like responsey songs, and then back into upbeat. And like literally I'll start kind of closed and dry, and the mix will start to open. The space, the depth will all start to open as the songs build, and it's just a really cool ride that you take the congregation on.
I think it's really cool to think about it that way, because like it's almost like boiling a frog. Or we have a pre-roll that happens before our worship set, and it starts out pretty quiet, and then it slowly is building over a 5-minute period of time to get people more comfortable with the volume.
Yep.
And so even though like song 1 is probably the most upbeat song for us on a Sunday, it probably still only peaks out at like 94.
Yeah.
And then my ballad, song 3, is going to be hitting 97,
Yeah.
98 at the big moment.
Right.
And it almost seems kind of counterintuitive. Like, wouldn't you want to like hit it hard at the beginning? Well, you don't want to freak people out, and you can kind of like build into this massive, like immersive moment where people are engaging and they're,
it's almost like they become overwhelmed and they don't know it.
right.
They just feel it, and
Right.
that's like something that you can't like explain unless you're.
And it's a
in the
good
room.
thing that they can't perceive it,
Yeah.
or maybe they perceive it, but they can't like point it out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. It's like you're helping tell a story.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's great because you're just directing them.
Yeah.
I feel that, man. It's great.
It's a really special feeling, I think, for a mixer when like you watch your audience kind of come to life. And like you said, you know, like not blowing the audience over at the front, but like taking them on a journey. Like that's something that inexperienced Mike didn't understand 10 years ago, 15 years ago, coming out of the studio into the live environment. Is that something that you guys kind of struggled with too at the first? I know like out of the gate, I want to just punch them.
Yep.
And that's not necessarily where it needs to go.
No.
So,
No, I feel you totally. Like 10 years ago, I would have spent at least 50% of my time trying to dial in my drums, like just perfecting them. It was all about, man, this verb or this vibe, or like, man, I need to just, that crack on the snare needs to be just right. And now I am leaning into my vocals. All right, how can I just make that vocal just a little bit more present and make those background vocals feel like it wraps around you a little bit more? And I'm like, oh, hey, I've matured a little bit as a mixer here, because like, I mean, when you think about like what people engage with, I mean, you can make somebody move with a beat or with the drums and bass or whatever, but like, if you can get them to a moment where maybe you pull down the system a little bit and the crowd takes it from like, I don't know, a chorus standpoint, or like you finish the end of a big song, but the worship leader takes it back into like just acoustic vocal. If you can at that moment pull the system down and the people are singing along and engaging, it's like, okay, well they engaged with that vocal.
well, that's intimacy.
Whenever I hear people give testimonies about moments that they've had during a worship service, they're never talking about the kick drum or the snare drum.
Right.
It's always some.
If they are, they're a sound guy.
That resonates with me. I'm like, man, that kick.
If they are, they're a sound guy. That's just all there is to it.
Yeah.
That's a heavenly snare right there.
Yeah. No, I think you're right though, and the same with you. Like they engage with the intimacy, and that's the vocal, that's that acoustic guitar at that moment, or that piano at that moment. Like we engage with the kick drum and the snare. I mean, you just can't not do it because you move. Like music moves us, but like that sets the foundation for the intimate moments in the song, the intimate pieces. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
That's the pieces I was missing when I first started mixing, was the intimacy part. You know, like you said, I mean, we just coming out, bam. You know, I want to run 90. You know, with a small, tiny room.
Yeah.
You know, so just learning to grow with dynamics. You know, and taking them on that journey, even before the definition room. You want to try to take them on that journey. You know.
Well, you mentioned just like the relationship between the stage and how like building those relationships, being able to talk to the musicians and vocalists and like get what you need from them, it helps your ability a lot. One of the things that I've really been digging into with my vocal teams lately is just the idea that like I have to have a solid melody all the time.
All the time.
Like, because we've been leaning into more of the maybe CeCe Winans style songs, like you're going to do a song like Believe for it, and on the back half, the worship leader needs to be able to start ad-libbing a little bit. Well, if everyone is on harmonies, like the congregation is lost. Like they don't know how to sing along anymore. And so being able to ask the team on stage, hey, with every song, who is my person that's going to be singing solid melody for me, or my people who are going to be singing solid melody besides the worship leader? Because it really allows me to like enforce that melody that then engages people. Because if I lose that melody, I can tell the congregation just stops singing. And like,
For some reason,
That's-
they don't want to do that. It seems like vocalists, they want to sing harmony.
they love
You
it.
know,
Yep.
you know.
And I don't blame them.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But there's the idea that, hey, we're all here for one vision and one goal, and that is to engage these people
Yeah.
in this moment. And I think that, I mean, that's a perfect example of how, like, you can only do so much with what you're given, but when you're able to start bridging the gap and communicating with the stage and asking them for what you need,
It's
that's
huge.
something that I never would have
Yeah.
done 10 years ago.
No, it's huge. That's something that we've actually been doing recently too, is really talking to, because we have 7 singers on the platform.
Yep.
Someone leads one song and that's it. You know, we do 4 to 5 songs a weekend. So not everybody gets a chance to lead a song, but literally out of the 7, 5 are always singing melody.
Wow.
And that's just how it is. We call it gang vocals.
Yeah.
Melody's got to win. Usually it's a high harmony on top of that.
Yep.
But I've even gone to the extent of like, hey guys, like I need you to actually monitor each other's like how you're singing it, the timing,
Phraseology.
the phraseology, all that, because a lot of our lead vocalists like to go off and ad lib and everything else, which is great, but I still need that foundational rhythmic melody
Yeah.
behind it, and so allowing our team to kind of learn how to do that.
Yeah. I've been telling the team lately, I'm like, okay, so here's what I'm looking for.
Yes.
I need it to be sing-alongable.
Yes.
Like the people in the auditorium need to be able to sing along with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I don't know. I've just
So much-
and they get a kick out of that. They think it's kind
Well,
of
I think
silly, but they understand.
Yeah.
It's back to the whole thing, you know, if you do love the kick drum, you're a sound guy. It's like if you're in the audience and you're picking that harmony out, it's because you're a vocalist.
Right.
It's not the normal person.
Right. Yep. Cool.
How about yours? What's your approach?
So, similar to yourself, I came out of the studio originally, and so, like, definition and clarity and separation of items is a huge thing for me. But I would say, and similar to how you said you're kind of like stylistically agnostic, I would say I've had to get there. I definitely have preferences, but because of our leadership, because the pastor at Highlands, Pastor Chris, is so musical. I mean, before he was a pastor, he was a worship leader, and he actually had an orchestra, and so he would hand chart out every single orchestra piece for every single song every week.
Wow.
And so when you have that as your senior pastor, he gives you the tools to get him what he wants, but then he holds you accountable to it. And so I would say, and similar to like being in the studio, there's a person who's ultimately responsible for the product, and that's the producer. And so I kind of like to play that role of producer, but like Pastor Chris was dictating what I'm doing because I know what he wants.
He's the executive producer.
And so, yeah, he's the executive producer. He's the guy that's like, I mean, I'm the engineer, so I am giving him what he wants. Like, now I'm going to try to like spread my style in there a little bit, maybe get him used to my style a little bit. He chooses me because he already likes where I'm going. But like, unlike maybe touring in the past where like maybe the vocal wasn't the thing. Like I used to mix a band that, man, the vocal was really just kind of a part of the experience, and like they didn't care if you couldn't understand a word they said. And so, and of course, church music, engaging the people in the message is the big deal. And so, but yeah, I mean, I think having like, so we just recently underwent the whole renovation, and having that definition system has really helped me lean into the vocals, and just being able to create an incredibly crisp, clean, present vocal coming from the stage, and then create more of that ambient, immersive feel with the definition system has been really great when it comes to like defining parts and defining where things are on stage, in the stereo image, and then I would also say, going back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, the whole dynamic journey.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there'll be moments where like I'll bring it down to 85 dB because I want the congregation to take it for a moment, and then I'll take it back and just take them on that journey.
Yeah.
I think that that the whole experience, thinking about the mix as an experience, is kind of the way I approach it. One of my mentors said once, he said, "You're not a mixer, you are an atmosphere facilitator. You're facilitating an atmosphere for people to connect with the presence of God." And he said, because he used to mix big country artists, and he said, man, he's like, I would take that approach when I was mixing a country artist and just be like, I am facilitating this atmosphere for people to have a good time.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll take that into the church world and be like, I'm facilitating this environment for people to experience the presence of God.
It's a big responsibility.
And it really is. It's weighty.
huge.
It's a lot of fun what we get to do, but we definitely can't forget like maybe just the person who's had an incredibly hard week and like how can we engage them in the moment. And I think these systems really help us create those kind of environments where people can come in and kind of get lost in the moment and just have a moment with God in an environment where there's hundreds, maybe thousands of people.
Yeah. I think, you said it best, like, we're creating an atmosphere for people. And when I think about it, I don't know how it is at your guys' churches, but I'd say at least half of our congregation's late.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Every service.
Especially at our 11:30 service.
And, so I'm thinking about, that single mom or that couple that, like, they've had a hard week, they've gotten an argument on the way to church, they're late, they're coming in late, they got to go sit way up in the nosebleeds. Like, does that mean that their experience needs to be less than the people that came in early? And that's a no.
Yeah.
That's a hard no. It needs to be the same. And I think that's one of the things that the definition rooms really like bring to life is it doesn't matter if you're in the very back row against the wall, like way up top in our venue, or you're in the middle. Like the message is the same.
Yeah.
The way you experience the message is the same. The way you experience the music is the same.
Yeah.
And it just really kind of, as a mixer, makes me not have to worry about that. I mean, I still walk my room as I mix just because I think it's important.
Make sure everything's working.
Yeah. But like at the same time, like having that confidence of knowing that seat way up there that no one really wants to sit in, but they have to because they're late, it still sounds good.
Right. Yeah.
And they can still like feel the presence. They can still feel the atmosphere that we're creating. It's really special.
Yeah.
It's like we're taking them from the minivan to the sanctuary. You want to get them out of like what just had, you just had to yell at your kids or something in the minivan, right? You want to take them from that, give them a space where they can fully like just experience God's presence and stuff, And how do we do that? How do we do that with manipulating reverb and what can you put around you to just help you get to that moment of crying out, singing out, whatever you do, you know what I mean? Just that moment where you can release and get into what's going on.
And even though like they're walking into an environment that's like unlike any other environment they're in all week, you want all of the stuff that's different to melt away.
Yeah.
And just live in the presence of God.
Yeah. Well, I think too, not to get all scientific, but like one of the things I love about mixing in a definition room is the acoustics in the room make it easier for you to absorb the message. A lot of people don't realize this, but like the more reflections you have, the more echoes you have, everything else, like your brain has to work harder to actually absorb what you're hearing. And like for the church world, we're trying to get a message across, a message of hope. And when you are fatigued or literally like struggling to understand, you don't walk out with the same understanding of what that message is as you do. Like in the definition rooms, the acoustics are so well done. There's not a lot of stuff moving around the room. You don't have to work really hard to like listen.
Yeah.
And I said earlier, about pastors not being fatigued when they walk off stage. Congregants aren't fatigued when they leave your room. Yeah. And that's a huge thing because if you're fatigued from listening when you leave your room, you don't retain much at all.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a big win.
Yeah. We at Highlands, Pastor Chris is definitely a teacher, not necessarily like a yeller, but at times before we got the definition system, to get him clear and understood at the back of the room, you had to turn it up to the point where if you're in the front, it kind of feels like he's yelling at you. And that is just not a good experience. And so the idea that like you said, it softens everything to the point where like it's comfortable for people, yet they can still understand clearly.
And in big rooms, like like all of ours, it can make the pastor feel like they have to yell,
Right.
you know, and in a room that's acoustically treated well, then it brings their their vocal energy level down, and they can be more intimate.
Well, it makes their experience
Right.
better, just like it makes the congregation's experience better.
I had something like that actually. You know, I mentioned in our old building is pretty much a gym. So over there, our pastor wanted to speak with in-ears in, so he could hear himself. You know, do
Yeah,
it,
sure.
You know?
Very common.
And then when we moved into the new building, he didn't need them at all. We're like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Yeah, I can hear myself great." And I mean, it's so dialed in the room that my associate and I sat on one side, like up at the top, and he sat on the other side, and we was able to have a conversation across the room without like yelling or like trying to understand what the other person's saying.
Yeah.
It's nuts,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that speaks to just the actual like acoustics of the room, and when you have people engaging in a message or in a worship environment, you can actually like feed off of the crowd a little bit.
Yeah.
So you got somebody that's giving an amen on this side of the room. It doesn't feel like it's super dead and it's just one person over there. It like people start to engage and interact off of each other.
Absolutely.